Okay, welcome to part 3 of the Minesweeper tutorials. Last tutorial we finished making the grid, and you can see there that we made a grid made of the size of 1, and we have all this information here relating to setting up the 2x2 array and setting it just with 1s, which we will change later. We've also got it here, which is where we're going to be able to update and render it, but we haven't got anything in there yet. So what we will do is we've got our button class and our timer class. We need to create a new tab, and we're going to call this one tile, because we're going to call them tiles. So in our tile class, we are going to have all the standard things like class, tile. Oops. And we need to put a couple of things in here. We need to put constructor. Ooh. Right, keys on the keyboard. There we go. Make that one. And then we're going to have a update. I like to organize the code neatly, and render, which is going to have all our information that we need to render. Alright, and there's our basic structure. I'm just going to hit save. Just remember, hit save through the project all the time. Now, what do we need? What do we need in this? We're going to have this dot position x. We're going to have this dot position y. This dot width. This dot height. And they're the basic ones we need to start off with. Now we're going to have to get all this information. So just remember, in a constructor, we put our variables at the top here that we want to input, and there are our 4 variables that we've got at the moment. And x is going to be position x, position y is going to be position y, it's going to be width for w, and height. So we're just setting up our position x, position y, width, and height for each of our tiles. So that's going to be where we place them in the grid across. Now if we can draw a grid, so we're just going to need, it's a pretty bad grid, but we're going to need positions for each of these. So each of these will have an x and a y position, and we'll have a width, and we'll have a height. So each box will have that information: width, height, x, and y. Yeah, so each box will have one of that. There. Each one will need that information. Now we're going to need a few more bits of information. We're going to need information about, we're going to have a couple of variables here. We're going to need a number, so what number it is, as in its position. We're going to need, we're going to use this grid x, and where its position is we're going to go grid y because we are using y as the rows and x as the columns. This grid width x is equal to gx, and now you see these come up green because these don't exist yet, so we need to put them up here. We go n, gy, and gx. So that's all informational data that we need in, but we still need a few more bits of information in this tile. And we're going to have these variables. These variables are going to be for the number of bombs. Bombs equals 0, so we just started out with no bombs in it. This dot is a bomb. This one's going to be false to begin with. So draw a false statement. Is it a bomb? Is it not a bomb tile? This dot is flagged. Again, whoops, false. having a bad day on the keyboard again. And this dot is revealed. To see if we've clicked on it. Yeah. They're all the things that we need to sort of be checking. So we need to know how many bombs are around the square. Is the square a bomb? Which sort of negates that one, but we need it for the other ones. And then is flagged, and then is revealed, whether we've actually clicked on the button. Now, we need a button. So each of the tiles is actually a button. So we have a tile. This is a tile. We want to be able to click on it. We want to be able to spam click and be able to click on it and reveals it. And it'll come up with, oh, it's a 3, or oh, this one is a bomb, or this one is blank because it's got no bombs around it. So we need to be able to click on it and then reveal what it does. So we need a button. So this active button, new button. Now, what does our button class need? So if we go over here to our button class, you can see our button needs an X and Y position, X, Y, width and height, needs text, and needs color. So we're going to go back to, go to the right one, tile, and we need X and Y position. Well, we've got our X and Y position. It's this dot position X, and this dot position Y, and then this is this dot width, this dot height, because this part is referring to the class, the individual one. That's why we had to put this on this. Otherwise, width would be the width of the actual game, which in our case would be 400. So we don't want that. That's why we use this is relating to just this class. And then we want text, which we don't want any text. We don't want these buttons to have text on. And I'm just going to set it to a nice gray button. So there's a button. So each of these tiles will have a button in it. Alright, so what do we need to do down in update and render? Well, let's have a little look and think about this for a second. Well, first thing we need to do is this dot active button needs to update. Just remember it's got its own update. See, button, you have an update class. Here it is. So we need to activate that. And you guessed it, down the bottom here, we need to do the same thing with the render. So we're going to go this dot active dot render. We need to be able to render them. That's what we need to do. So we set up our basic stuff, and now it's time to actually go ahead and make the grid. But we're going to save first, so go ahead and save. So we've got our variables that we need to take in. We've got them going into their own variables for just each tile because of this. We've got setting up our other variables, and we've got setting up our button. We've updated our button. We've rendered our button. So we're going to go back to Minesweeper. So in here we put a 1. We're going to change this now. We've actually got a class we can put in there, so we're going to change it to a class. It's going to be new tile. And then, now this is where it gets a little bit crazy. How big is our screen? Our screen is the width. So we need x, because that's our x up here. That's how many times we want to go across, times by the width of the screen. See, that's not this width, it's just width of the screen, divided by how big the grid is. That's the grid size, which we set up here, which is 10. That's our first variable. That was our x. Now we need to do the same thing for y. But I made y a bit bigger. I made y 600. So we're going to leave the 200 at the top. So we're going to push it down 200 straight away. Plus, that's where mass comes in. I'm going to go y, same thing. I'm going to go the height. No, we're actually going to go the width because we want a square. We want a square. So because we've set this up this way, we've got 400 here, we've got 200 here. We're getting rid of the 200. Not worrying about that. We've got 400 left over. So we're going to just use width because we want it to be a perfect square. If you do width by width, it'll be 400 by 400. So we're going to go times by width here, divided by grid size. Whoops, size needs to have a capital S. Boom, there's the X and Y positions. Now, what do we want our width of each tile to be? We want width divided by 2. Not width divided by our grid size. Just think about trying to get the center of the square. Alright, so that's our width, so it's 400 divided by 10, which is 40. So each tile will be 40, and we want the exact same thing the other way as well, because we've already taken into consideration the 200 at the top for our 600. We've already taken that into consideration, and we're going to go grid size. There we go. I'm going to put a comma in. Now I'm just going to spacebar down so it doesn't go off the edge of the screen. What's our next thing that we need? What was our next thing we needed in our tile class? So we've got 1, we've got X, we've got Y, we've got width, we've got height. What was next? What do we need next? Let's have a look. N, what number it is. Cool. And then we need what its Y and X value are in the set. Alright, so we're going to go Y, and Y at the moment is 0, times by the grid size, because we're in row 0, that would be 0, plus X. And that will get us numbers from 0 all the way through to 99. And then we need our Y and our X, because we needed our grid position for Y and our grid position for X. That'll be 0, and that'll be 0, and then it'll be 0, 1, and then 0, 2, and 0, 3, and 0, 4, and all the way through until it gets to 99. Alright, we've set up our grid. That's awesome. If we save this, and if we run this, nothing should happen just yet, but you shouldn't get an error. So if you have got an error, go back through your code, check it. Go back through the video and check as well. So the last little thing we're going to do at the moment is we're going to come down here, scroll down into our drawer, and see how we set up this double for loop. That was to iterate through our grid, and we're going to actually be able to do that now. So we're going to go grid, square bracket, Y and X, because we need rows and then columns, because that's how we set this one up. 8, excuse me. 8. So we're going to update the grid, and then grid. Oops. Oh boy, I'm bad down the keyboard. Okay, Y and X. I'm going to render the grid. There we go. So now if you run this, what's going to happen? Well, we get a grid. We can click grid, but it doesn't do anything just at the moment. It doesn't do anything. But we do know we're clicking, because if you come down here, you can see I've clicked 17 times. But you've got all these buttons. Oh, still clicking when I'm not even on the grid. Cool. Alright, but we've got a grid. We've got a nice grid. I'm going to save our work. So that was the for loop, double for loop there with our grid. Now, if we go and change this, I'm going to change this to 20. Oops, I hit the insert key. To make a bigger grid, and there you go, you got a bigger grid. So everything works off this grid size now. So if you really wanted to go crazy, you can make it 40. It's really tiny grid squares. So we're going to leave it at 10 just to begin with, because that's a nice number. Alright, so that we've set up our grid, and we've set it up with tiles. So our tile class now looks like this at the moment. We've got our constructor, oh, that's our timer, tiles, constructor, we've got our positioning information, we've got our extra information about bombs, number of bombs, and we've got our button, we're updating our button, and we're rendering our button. in the main, we have now got, when we create the grid, we have Y and X for rows and columns, and now it's updated with a tile for each one. And then as we go down here, we've got our for loop, and we've added our grid into here, which updates and renders. So that's it for this one. We finished creating our tiles. In the next one, we're going to look at setting up bombs and revealing squares. So revealing our tiles, I think we'll probably do that first, and then we'll set up some bombs. Alright, that's it for this tutorial.